So we had a lot of discussing the previous rehearsal that we did in here, as well as everything that's come before and everything that will come after. But this was also about getting some specific staging, framing, structuring, understandings and agreements for what we actually do in December. And the major points were, it will be a piece in the black box, both because we can be darker there without falling off stages at the Jésus, and also because we can use the space or exhaust the space in a more potentially juicy way like we did last time. And the Anklang plays an important part, including in sound and audience engagement and making connections among performers and audiences. Darkness will play a role, and contact, something, including audience contact. So that the darkness maybe is an opportunity for the audience to use their cell phone lights to light up different musicians or maybe that's an invitation for us to go and touch the musicians or touch the audience or have some kind of physical contact. So light contact or physical contact. There's a potentially discursive part within the performance, although without anyone becoming didactic or expert versus the person who's having the discourse directed at them. The music will arise without absolute rules from all of the framings that we have constructed and are employing, and there will be some sort of residue or remains or trace for the audience to take back with them.
And for the audience, I was wondering if we had, every time we were with you, we had a food experience.
Yeah.
And it was a part of the piece for me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what it should be or what it could be, but probably for another sense to make in relief another sense for the audience. I don't know if we could go in this way. I know that our purpose was to translate food, art, and music, but at the same time, food art is really not organic, of course. And could we try to connect it to music in a sense on the stage with tasting, playing, I don't know. But since it is a very special, it's not only a normal performance, but we invite people to come with us, then I don't know. It was just an idea after we said that, it would be nice to have people around and to
Could you make boiled ram's gut strings?
Of course.
And cut up digestible?
Well, this has been a question in my mind, is there a food component? Is this a process of translating my work in food art into musical art, or is it a process of bringing the two together? I mean, is that what translation is in any case? I don't know. But that's also part of the sort of the research question, I guess, that's being presented. I think, so historically I have done edible stuff in the black box, although technically the black box is a no food and drink space. So if it's art, it's okay.
Those caramels are definitely art.
Yeah. If they get stuck to the black velvet curtains, then, oh, sorry, that's a residue that someone has to take home with them. But it's always a special.
How do they know it's
putting food in
caramel?
art.
Could just be goop.
It could be goop. Yeah, but to be explored definitely.
I like the idea that food is part of it.
Good.
Who would be against that, really?
Yeah. Someone who doesn't like food, that's for sure.
Well, and if it is, there are all these horrible museum installations where you like taste the chocolate and then look at a painting of chocolate.
yes,
and
yeah,
that,
no.
that kind of bullshit is very
Ew.
in opposition to what I'm interested in. But if there is some kind of edibility or mouth and nose sensory.
I'll bring you my old
experience.
strings.
Just cook them and see what happens.
Yeah.
Well,
Ooh.
actually, you could do something. If you boil them down, there would be some interesting collagen that probably comes out of them. And like soup, maybe.
String soup.
And if they're old, that means you get like finger dirt, skin. Nobody
Skin-
wants
skin
it.
soup.
I find it fascinating. I would eat it.
With a little sprinkle of upapi.
Well, it's kind of funny though, because when you think about it, there's so many things that they describe as looking like food or tasting like the glaciers. Just even in that one, that there's this thing called rock flour, and you literally you smell it, it coats you, it's you taste it. I'm sure, and it's the consistency of flour. I'm sure you could make stuff with it because it doesn't taste obviously like a grain or anything like that. But even in describing, when people describe things in geologic formations, are often described like food. Something is loaf-like, it is mushroom-like, it is, it blooms, there is a bloom. We call, there's all of these descriptions that people use. So it's really kind of, there has to be a way. Yeah.
My eyes are gonna spell. I shouldn't be. Well, what might be quite interesting in terms of the ecological nature of this exploration is that it started with some foods. It started with GG foods. These are not GG foods, but they're sort of doing this. They've been stimulating and encouraging a bunch of discussions and a lot of music making and a lot of experimentation and improvisation, and then whatever gets made could be stimulated by where we get to, say, at the beginning of December. And so it's not actually a GG product or a caramel or a whatever, but is an effect of the process. So wherever we get by December 5th becomes my inspiration for making something that has residual effects in the people who come later on. So just a continuing series of translations. Of course, that means that I have to figure something out quickly. Go shopping.
Well, also like when you shook our hands, that wasn't. I mean, it was edible in a way, but it wasn't ingested. That's interesting too. Like the food and it's more art,
Yeah.
Legalement.
Yeah. Well,
It had a
there's-
very strong odor.
Well, the questioning, I think there's some invitation and questioning that I've often played with in these things. And Displace, which was the piece that was in the black box, we had liquids and solids that were basically liquids and gels that were not very recognizable as food, except they produced sensory effects in the body when you looked at them and when you smelled them and when you listened to them and you tasted them. There was all this stuff that was happening, so they were edible and consumable, but not explicitly framed as food. Not a caramel with a powder, but it's the powder is actually sort of the evolution of that. It's like, is it food? Well, it's producing a lot of sensory experience in the mouth. So yeah, it doesn't have to be cake.
A line of what isn't food that's still consumable is really interesting to me, because
Well,
it's not, it's something that you kind of have to engineer. Like,
Yeah.
it's not the food that we keep in our homes, it's not anything that we, like, it's very much, to me, an art practice.
Yeah, it's a
yeah.
I think a lot of the things that we have in our homes or in supermarkets are
Indeed.
edible but not food.
Well, and that's in a lot of my work with digital collaboration is very much about how you break something down to a component which is still effectively food, but then build it back up into something that's more. So the digitization of food is some other question.
Yeah.
I mean, in much the same way that analog and digital music have a lot of play back and forth and questioning about what is that now that you've just made.
Sure, yeah.
isn't music anymore.
David, is it conceivable in any way that in this interval between Jesu and the evening, the audience prepares something with us and we eat it together and then we go to the evening performance? Is that a conceivable concept for you even, or is it too near to experience concerts or something like that, or experience things?
Yeah, I mean, there are different ways that can happen. The risk is that it seems that it becomes shticky.
Yeah, exactly. That's my question.
The risk, the other thing is it's space and facilities and cleanup and prep and all that stuff. Just catering is always like the question and those sorts of things. So if it was something more like, not just a potluck dinner, but you have to bring a piece, and then that gets assembled into a thing, and then that gets shared.
Yeah, I don't mean a potluck dinner. I mean more like producing these powders.
Yeah.
You know, not the traditional sense of cooking,
Mm.
but something where the audience with us engages in something that you have designed,
Mm-hmm.
and that ends up with something edible that we then can eat.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking that it might be very interesting, and even if something has to rest for 30 minutes and we have to talk while it rests, you know, that will generate a totally different dynamic in the group. And then the evening concert will be, it will not be like, okay, so I have something at 2 to 3:30, then I have to wait for 5 hours or 4.5 hours until the doors open for the other concert, and what do I do in between, and I'd rather go home now. But that there's this option as an audience member that you can engage in something that takes some time, and during that time we're with the musicians, we're just one, and that would be something that that would rhyme with Mary and Nick's. You know, in some things we're not experts, and that creation of this thing would be I don't know yet,
Yeah,
but
it is. So I was just in response. So when I said potluck, I didn't mean potluck dinner, but something where things where everyone brings some kind of component that then gets made into a whole. But there's also staging something where there's participation. I have tried that many times, and there's often a lot of hesitancy. Well, first of all, it is extraordinarily logistically complicated. Just always is when food is involved. Not to say that it can't happen, but it does add an extra layer of organization and stuff. There's often very much hesitancy because many people feel that they are not good cooks, to even participate in a shared making of powders could become very, very challenging to those people. Again, that can be figured out to facilitate it. And fear of collective eating. People just say, no, I'm going to go get a burger and I'll see you afterwards. Increasingly people are very private about their food. And so if there's a break and it's optional, I can also imagine there would be a lot of engagement, unless there was a very key draw invitation, something that was so compelling that you couldn't avoid it. So all those things can be worked with.
I
and
had a
those are some
vision.
responses. Yeah.
I was imagining that I had like 5 bows on a little table, and this part wrapped in plastic and with some kind of sticky stuff, and all the powders or really anything, the starter is on the bow, and the audience has to choose which bow, and they have to touch it and help hold it and then give it to me, and I touch it and hold it and play. I don't know. So we both get the sticky thing.
Yeah.
We have to not ruin the bow or get some cheap bow. And they have the sticky thing on their hand. So do I, but they made some choice and passed the sound making thing.
Yeah.
Just to volunteer a more disposable instrument. I can play my instrument with like
Yeah.
you know, like
Or it
handful
could
of
be,
eggs
it
if
could
you
be,
really want me to.
it could be the sticks for the drum,
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
but it's full of food.
Yeah, I'm gonna-
And both audience, and we can't play unless they hand it to us, and both people get sticky. But, or something, and they can lick their hand. I mean, I did taste the starter, you know.
I think 4.5 hours is also a
Long time.
a long gap to ask people to be present for something. Like, my feeling is that people would just wanna go home and, like, it's just a really long period of time between two events, on a Sunday. I don't know about you guys, but every moment of a weekend is, you know, like, really precious. So, hanging around, waiting for something to happen is, so I just don't think that we're gonna, I would, if we're gonna go to as much trouble as David says it is to make something like that happen, we'd have to be sure that people would stay, and I don't have much confidence that they will.
I think it's if we, were you gonna?
Oh, I don't know, it would be very, just something would have to be really compelling to make me stay.
Yeah.
Like, I just personally.
Gold and caviar, Japanese whiskey.
Hovering.
And, but what I'm gonna, I think if it's okay, because just figuring it out right now, I don't think is possible, but I would go back to my kitchen and look around and start thinking about instruments or invitational materials, or what could be made without enormous investiture, that could be made by 6 people or 40 people. But then also I'm doing a workshop at Fourth Space with those powders on Friday that is meant to be invitational and questioning, and I'll see if there's anything that comes out of that, as almost always there is, that might help answer this question better.
Yeah, and I think there is a kitchen in Milieu.
And on the 11th floor?
On the 11th floor.
Yeah.
I don't know how well equipped it is. I've never been there.
Not well.
It's just a heating up thing.
I've always, every time I've done a food performance at Concordia, it's semi-illegal and uncomfortable, because there's always not enough heating. Anyway, it can be, I'll figure out what can be feasible. I know this building pretty well.
But like, to your point, maybe if that's the case, then the events are more, like, not marketed, but aimed at 2 different kinds of things. Like, one is if you came to participate, or like not participate, but like have a discussion or hear a discussion, because that is something that people are interested in. And then the other one is more a performance or something like that. Like, I think that would, especially like it being a daytime thing, maybe people can't make it to both or whatever, and they just want to come to one. But the idea of like one is more discourse based, you know, where it's participatory in that way, where people are allowed to see and like the look and listen kind of concert idea, and then the other one is more like the fully formed event or something. Like, I think that does make more sense to me, because you know, that will present a confusing situation for a lot of audience members, I think, to see, you know, there's this thing at 1 and this thing at 8. Like, what do we do? Yeah.
One thing that could work is that the thing that's being made has an immediate purpose of maybe consumption by the people at the afternoon thing, but then it's also like, I don't know, something that's like generated in a quantity or something, and then it's brought back artistically or something, and then there's like, how are they gonna, what are they gonna do in that mystery of having the experience of having tasted, you know, they tasted the thing, and then we're like, our piece is based on this thing, and we'll be using it, and then they're like, oh, I'm gonna do laundry and then go see this show. I don't know. But the idea that, I like the idea that it's tied in with something, like the waiting, like, this is North America. So maybe in Europe.
No, it's a big city. It's just a big city. I
Also,
think if it were a small,
Yeah.
if it were a band, it would work. But
Yes.
it was-
Yeah, if it were, I had a captive audience, but it's.
You don't- Oh, that's
Must
easy.
stay
At the door.
This is part of the experience.
Also, it's going to be December, so there may be snow. That changes things in Montreal, no?
Oh, we
Yes,
can do a
yes.
version of like snow, like maple. But it tastes like
With spice.
Yeah.
Yeah, and lots of salt.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
Ooh, melted like fondue poured onto snow. And then
Yeah.
pick it up like hard.
Okay, I see this.
If there are
Many videos around that.
few tasted thing around in the space
Mm.
around musicians, and maybe it could, and something that also has a perfume.
Mhm.
It could be some a kind of experience if you listen to the voice, for instance, and you go close to the voice and oh, what is it? Yeah. I think, oh my God, it's something like that. Maybe it's
Well, and
not very. Je l'explique pas bien. It's not well explained, but it could be interesting to connect.
Yeah. So in
It's
smell-
not food, as you
Smell
said.
and sound are
Smell,
very similar
sound,
in the way
and-
that they come
and
from
taste.
somewhere, they travel through
Yeah.
space, and so they're spatially, it's a
We mix
distant sense.
many senses. Maybe.
Yeah, I think if the audience were to come into a space that smells of yeast, I think it would be quite interesting. It would be a very unusual experience for the Concordia building, for a space to smell of yeast or of other
Yeah.
substances.
Yes.
That would already set the stage in a very decisive way.
And that could be
Mhm.
tasted also.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would be interested in having the food be very, not secondary, but I wouldn't want this to become a food performance. And it's very
Mhm.
easy because food is so spectacular in art spaces that it becomes the focus. I think it's important that the food's potentially a component, but not
Yes.
not like, ooh, look at the chocolate. It just becomes so dominant too in our culture to ignore the other things that
But I think we're on a good way. I mean, I don't know if you want to play music. We have 1 hour left, technically. But is there music playing that we want to do? Do you feel like playing something in this constellation? You all impact your instruments.
My original intent with these powders, in not telling you what they were, was to have them be a stimulus for a musical gesture of some sort. To taste one, and if you want to taste the one you liked or the one you didn't like, and does that make you respond in a certain way? Does that produce a sound for you? Does that produce a gesture that would then turn into sound? If you want.